Hello, welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. Nuclear variation, some of the genetic variation populations probably has little or no impact on reproductive success, and thus natural selection does not affect these alleles. For example, most of the DNA-based differences between humans that are found in untranslation or untranslated parts of the genome appear to confer no selective advantage and therefore are considered neutral variation. And in pseudogenes, genes that have become inactivated by mutations, genetic noise is free to accumulate in all parts of the gene. The relative frequencies of neutral variations are not affected by natural selection. Over time, some neutral alleles increase in frequency and others decrease through genetic drift. Even mutational changes that alter proteins that can be neutral, for example, data from Drosophila suggests that roughly half of the amino acid changing Drosophila changing mutations that arise and subsequently become fixed have no selective effect, that is, they do not affect protein function. Of course, it is possible that genetic differences that appear to be neutral may actually influence survival and reproductive success in ways that are difficult to measure. Furthermore, a variant allele may be neutral in one environment but not in another. The debate over the extent of neutral variation continues, but one thing is clear: even if only a fraction of the extensive variation in a gene pool significantly affects fitness, that is still an enormous reservoir of raw material of natural selection and adaptive rules and adaptive evolution. Sexual selection. Charles Darwin was the first to explore the implications of sexual selections, which is natural selection for mating success. This type of selection can result in sexual dimorphism, marked differences between the sexes in secondary sexual characteristics, which are not directly associated with reproduction. Notice this figure. It is important to distinguish between these distinctions include differences in size, color, and ornamentation. Invertebrates males are usually the shower sex. It is important to distinguish between intrasexual and intrasexual selection. Intrasexual selection meaning selection within the same sex. It is a direct competition among individuals of one sex for mates of the opposite sex. Intrasexual selection is usually most obvious in males. For example, in many species, a single male patrols a group of females and prevents other males from mating with them. The patrolling male may defend his states by defeating smaller, weaker, or less fierce males in combat. More often, he's the psychological victor in ritualized displays that discourage would be competitors but do not risk injury that would reduce his own fitness. But evidence is growing that intrasexual selection can take place between females as well. In ring-tailed lemurs, for example, females dominate males and also establish hierarchies of dominance among themselves. Let's talk about natural, notice this one, sexual dimorphism and sexual selection. Notice also there is intrasexual selection between competing males, followed by intrasexual selection when the females choose among the choice males. Let's talk about why natural selection cannot fashion perfect organisms. As we noted in chapter 22, nature abounds with examples of organisms that seem to be less than ideally engineered for their lifestyles for several reasons. When evolution is limited by historical constraints, each species has a legacy of descent with modification from a long line of ancestral forms. Evolution does not scrap ancestral anatomy and build each new complex structure from scratch. It copies existing structures and adapts them to new situations. For example, we would imagine how some birds species might benefit by having wings for flight as well as forelegs for speedy maneuverable running instead of just two legs, but bears descended from reptiles that had only two pairs of limbs and competing for the four limbs for flights, left only the two hind limbs for moving around on the ground. Two adaptations are often compromises. Each organism must do many different things. A sail spends part of its time on rocks. It could probably walk better if it had legs instead of flippers, but it would not swim nearly as well. We humans owe much of our versatility and athleticism to our prehensile hands and flexible limbs, which are also make us prone to sprains, torn ligaments, and dislocations. Structural reinforcement has been compromised for agility. Chance and natural selection interact. Chance events affect the subsequent evolutionary history of populations. For instance, when a storm billows insects or bears hundreds of males. Over an ocean to an island, the wind does not necessarily transport the species or the members of a species that are best suited to the new environment. Thus, not all adults present in the founding populations gene pool are better suited to the new environment than adults left behind. For situation selection can edit all existing variation. Natural selection favors only the fitness phenotypes among those currently in the population, which may not be the ideal traits. New owls do not arise to demand. With these constraints, evolution cannot craft perfect organisms. Natural selection operates on a better than basis. We can see evidence for evolution in the many imperfections of the organisms to produce.